found this wine bottle display and I thought this would make a very nice intarsia project. I'm going to trace this out as two diagrams, the background and the foreground. I'm using Logic Trace 2018 and I've selected Tracing Polylines. There's only about 6 sections that I have to trace out on this diagram, the perimeter and some of the internal parts. Again, I always mention it's easy to trace out a diagram that's a good size, and this diagram is big. When I'm finished, I'll end up with two files. I'll end up with the background file, which you're looking at here, and I'll end up with the foreground file, which will be the bottle and the glass. I'm going to cut these files using different species of wood. I'm going to use black walnut, I'm going to use birch, I'm going to use pine, I'm going to use some black hardboard and some white hardboard. I'm going to stack all these different woods together to give it a nice three-dimensional and colorful look. Shown here, I've started to trace out the bottle area, the glass, and the grapes. There's a bit more tracing to the bottle, glass, and the grapes. It's a bit more detailed, a lot of parts. To me, intarsia is kind of like a puzzle, and then you just substitute all the different parts with different species of wood or different colors. Gives it a nice effect. Because I'm using all these different species of wood, black walnut, birch, pine, you end up having enough material to make 2 or 3 plaques. So I'm going to be making 2. Also, it's a good point to mention here that if you make a mistake while you're tracing, the Logic Trace 2008 software has the capabilities of editing, so you select Edit, toggle back to that part you don't like, delete it, and just redo it. And as I'm tracing, I also save my work frequently, just in case. So when I'm finished tracing out all these parts, I'll end up having 2 files, 2 DXF files. I'll have the background file and I'll have the foreground file. I've loaded the background file into the CO2 laser. I've programmed the laser for a 1/4 inch cut, and you can see here I'm cutting out the background. The material being shown here is white pine. I also want to mention that when you have this DXF file into the laser, programmed for a cut, you can select certain parts to cut out separately, and you'll see later on where I cut the grapes and some of the bottle parts. I also programmed a low power cut just to do those designs on the leaves. You don't want that to cut right through. I nicknamed that the scribe cut. Here I've loaded the bottle and the glass and the grape area, the foreground, into the CO2 laser, and I'm going to cut these parts out using black walnut. These panels cut very easily. I'm using about 70% power and about 0.47 speed. It's a 150 watt CO2 laser. Cuts it nicely. When the cut's complete, the parts just pop right out. Shown here, I'm using birch plywood for the cut. This is where I'm using different species of woods. Again, the parts just pop out after the cut. Here I'm using a black hardboard to cut out the grapes. And here I'm using a white hardboard to cut out the bottle area. I wanted the bottle area to look light. Here I've started some of the assembly where I'm working on two plaques, combining different types of woods on top of each other. I completed the assembly, ended up with two plaques, and I've given them both a clear coat. You can see there's quite a difference between the two. I eliminated some of the background in the last plaque. I always enjoy intarsia projects.